Well, good afternoon now, almost good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Grateful to be here today. First of all, I'd like to start out by accepting the committee's technical amendments, and I just want to take a moment to say thank you to the amazing staff from Natural Resources for all the work on this, along to Ms. Pavley as well, and for making those clarifications, and very grateful. Mr. Chair, California's coast is truly a world wonder. Its natural splendor and diversity of landscapes attracts over 150 million visitors annually from all across the planet, seeking to witness its unparalleled beauty. While Northern California is known for its majestic redwoods and rocky shores, Southern California has its iconic palm trees and warm sandy beaches. The coast is part of the Golden State's identity, and we have spent billions to protect its natural resources. The California coast has another incredible benefit, and that is it's a core part of our state's economic engine. California, as we all know, has the world's 8th largest economy. California coastal communities contribute $40 billion annually to the state's economy and provide nearly 500,000 important jobs. Commercial fisheries in the state of California are valued to be more than $7 billion on an annual basis. Ocean-dependent tourism is valued at $10 billion annually. And recreational fishing is valued at over $2 billion per year along California's coast. In fact, California's coastal economy rivals some of our state's top economic sectors, including agriculture, which is a $42.6 billion industry. And I got to say, Mr. Chair, I'm grateful and honored to be able to represent almost 40% of the state's coastline, from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Oregon border. The ocean is part of our life and livelihood on the North Coast. And as chair of the Joint Committee on Fisheries and Aquaculture, I know that the impacts of an oil spill would have a devastating impact on our ocean fisheries, aquaculture, and coastal-dependent economies. I'm going to give you an example of this. During the Deepwater Horizon spill and disaster off of the Gulf Coast, 36% of Gulf fisheries were devastated, 36%. That said, 100% of the multi-billion-dollar commercial and recreational fishing industry were destroyed for years because consumers were afraid to consume Gulf shrimp and shellfish. Still to this day, they have yet to recover, and this could very well happen here in California. What happens in one coastal zone impacts the entire state. California ocean-dependent economies are very much connected, which is why we bring forward Senate Bill 788, the California Coastal Protection Act of 2015. 788 seeks to protect our coast and economy by repealing loophole language that was embedded into the legislation that was actually brought forward in 1994 to permanently ban offshore oil and gas drilling off of the California coast. The Sanctuary Act, passed in '94, currently contains an exception from the offshore extraction prohibition that it was trying to achieve by allowing new oil and gas leases off of California. It grants the California State Lands Commission the ability to grant new leases for offshore oil and gas drilling. Even the governors of the western states have concerns about the impacts of an oil spill off our shared coast, despite improved technologies. In a recent letter, which all of you have now been provided, the governors of California, Washington, and Oregon shared their concerns of potential oil spill off of our pristine coastline. They jointly signed a letter urging the President of the United States to not expand offshore oil development in federal waters by stating a sizable spill anywhere along our shared West Coast would have devastating impacts on our population, recreation, natural resources, and our ocean and coastal dependent economies. And what's good for federal waters should be good for California. In 1969, Santa Barbara experienced one of the nation's worst oil spills. The oil spill resulted from a well drilling blowout at an offshore oil platform off of the coast. The incident lasted 11 days and spilled 4.2 million gallons of crude oil. 200 square miles of ocean and 35 miles of California coastline were oiled, and thousands of animals were killed. As a result, California has taken a position intentionally to forgo any revenue from new offshore oil development due to the unacceptably high risk, and has instead focused on developing clean, renewable energy. And I do want to say thank you to Senator Pavley for her amazing leadership on that. As previously mentioned, In 1994, the California legislature intended to codify a ban on new offshore oil and gas leases by passing the Sanctuary Act. However, Senate amendments to the act included Public Resources Code 6244. The reason I mention this is it now allows the State Lands Commission to grant new leases and to ensure the state is reimbursed for draining oil and gas from offshore revenues. Here's the topper. And then in 1999, the state passed the Marine Life Protection Act. So in 94, we had the Sanctuary Act. In 99, we passed the Marine Life Protection Act. This act is designed to protect or conserve marine life and habitat. The goal of the act is to designate a region as a marine protected area and, quote, increase effectiveness at protecting the state's marine life, habitat, and ecosystems. But here's the contradiction. We allow for new offshore oil drilling via the 94 Sanctuary Act while passing the Marine Life Protection Act, whose whole goal is to protect the sensitive coastal areas and marine life. The MLPA provided stringent new marine protection guidelines in the same coastal regions that remain open to new offshore oil drilling that are authorized under the Coastal Sanctuary Act. As a result, the Coastal Sanctuary Act and the Marine Life Protection Act have conflicting mandates, which allow for offshore drilling in areas that were subsequently designated to protect and conserve marine life. And I will wrap up, as I know it is getting late. It has been 50 years since the state last granted a lease for new offshore oil. In 2009, an EIR was commissioned to potentially allow for offshore oil drilling off of the California coast. This proposal would have removed 4 oil rigs and brought forward other environmental enhancements. This was the most environmentally preferred alternative that we've ever seen brought forward in modern time. Yet, it was rejected. And time again, the State Lands Commission has brought forward quit claims every chance they get to stop offshore oil. It's time to finish the business that was started in '94. It's time to close the door on new offshore oil drilling. Even with new and enhanced technology, offshore oil drilling poses too great of risk. Finally, there is no way a new offshore oil rig off of California's coast will ever be able to achieve approval because of the environmental risks. As we've seen in 2009, there is no hurdle that can be achieved to look at new offshore oil drilling. This bill is practical. It doesn't touch existing rigs or infrastructure. And we all know that Californians need oil and gas in their daily life to keep moving. And we also acknowledge what oil and gas, their industries, bring to this state. But the risk to our environment and our state's economy is too great to allow more offshore oil. And the bottom line, it will be next to impossible to be able to approve. And I want to also point out that we have all agreed that we need to be able to advance 50% reduction of petroleum by 2030, which this will also help achieve our goals. I want to say thank you to Senator Jackson and Doss Williams for their amazing work on this issue, along with Senator Wolk and Senator Allen for being co-authors. And today, Mr. Chair, we have Linda Kropp, Chief Counsel from the Santa Barbara Environmental Defense Center, Tim Sloan from the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen, along with Amy Trainer from the West Marin Environmental Action Committee to be able to speak. And I appreciate everyone's patience, and you can now take a drink. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator McGuire, for your comprehensive explanation of the bill. Please again.
Hey, there we go.
I had to look at my watch to figure out whether to say good morning or good afternoon.
For sure, good afternoon now.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Senator McGuire, Chair Stone, members of the committee. My name is Linda Kropp. I'm Chief Counsel with the Environmental Defense Center from Santa Barbara, the site of the 1969 oil spill. I'm very pleased to be here today in support of SB 788, the California Coastal Protection Act of 2015. EDC was the sponsor of the original California Coastal Sanctuary Act in 1994. We applaud the legislature on considering this amendment, which would implement the vision for that law, which was to protect the California coast from the risk of another offshore oil spill. SB 788 would close the final loophole in the act by eliminating the possibility of oil leasing in state waters off of our coast. And as the senator mentioned, this would be consistent with the state's position on federal oil leasing. And I think if we are going to be successful in that effort, we need to also provide the same benefits in state waters. We also support this bill because it would uphold the integrity of the California Marine Life Protection Act, and in particular because it would support and protect 2 marine reserves located offshore Vandenberg and Point Conception, which would be impacted by proposed oil development near the Vandenberg Air Force Base into state waters, which would require a new lease. This area is known as the North America Galapagos. It is one of 5 biodiversity hotspots on the planet. It's very important that we protect this area from the devastating impacts of an oil spill. And the threat is real. There is a proposal to drill into this area if a lease is granted. As the senator mentioned, an EIR already looked at that issue and found that that would result in many, many significant impacts to the coast. SB 788 would not only protect our coastal environment, but it would also protect coastal economies, which contribute $40 million annually to the state's economy, including revenue from tourism, fishing, and other businesses that rely on a clean and healthy environment. People in Santa Barbara and throughout the state recall the devastating 1969 oil spill. Please do not allow such a tragedy to occur again off our coast. Please support SB 788. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tim Sloan. I'm the program director with the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations. We're the largest organization of commercial fishing men and women on the West Coast. We represent 12 ports in California, comprising hundreds of Californians who rely on the state's marine resources for their livelihoods. California's commercial fisheries contribute $7 billion to the state's economy annually, and 150,000 Californian jobs depend on healthy, productive fisheries. These jobs are not just within the fleet, but they're also the seafood processors, wholesalers, equipment manufacturing and sales, shipwrights, and the like. And these men and women all contribute to providing healthy, sustainable protein for California's dinner tables. The people of the fishing fleet and the larger seafood economy are integral to our state's coastal communities, and they're a source of California's unique coastal heritage. Oil drilling in California's waters threatens those jobs, that heritage, and could kill the fishing community's contribution to the state's economy. Now, offshore drilling poses serious concerns to the fishery before drilling ever begins. Rig construction disrupts habitat and closes fishing grounds, with landings decreasing accordingly. Port facilities that have traditionally been used for the fishing fleet have been co-opted by oil companies, leaving fishermen with nowhere to go, nowhere to moor, nowhere to get gas, and nowhere to store their equipment. Now, of course, these problems pale in comparison to the potential effects of a catastrophic oil spill. After the Deepwater Horizon spill in the Gulf of Mexico, as Senator McGuire said, as much as 36% of the fishing grounds in the Gulf were closed for those 5 states' fleets. That's the equivalent of closing California's fisheries from Fort Bragg to the Oregon border. And that's just unacceptable. Moreover, in Louisiana, the oyster harvest was cut in half in the year after the Gulf spill. And in Mississippi, the shrimp harvest decreased by 60%. And we can't let our California fisheries get cut in half. It's just absurd. The effects of these closed fisheries last more than just one fishing season, with NOAA, the parent agency of the National Marine Fisheries Service, coming out and saying that the full effects of the Gulf spill won't be felt for several generations to come. And perhaps even more problematic, as Senator McGuire pointed out, is that the Deepwater Horizon spill caused a massive shift in the public's perception of the healthfulness and relative safety of Gulf seafood that has no relationship whatsoever to the actual safety of that seafood, with 23% of consumers saying that they would reduce or stop consuming that seafood after the disaster because of fear of oil contamination and toxic dispersants in their food. Accordingly, we remain steadfastly opposed to all oil drilling in the state, and we urge your aye vote on this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and honorable members of the committee. I'm Amy Traynor, the Executive Director of the West Marin Environmental Action Committee, and also representing the California Coastal Protection Network. We'd like to express our strong support for Senate Bill 788 that seeks to eliminate Public Resources Code 6244, known as the drainage exception, which several oil companies have sought to exploit to drill off of our coast. Last week was the unfortunate 5th anniversary of the British Petroleum Deepwater Horizon disaster.
If you could kind of summarize your comments. I'm sorry, we're running out of time.
Absolutely.
But we do want to hear your testimony, but if you could summarize.
That disaster represented a real tragedy. 10 million gallons of oil remain on the bottom floor of the Gulf. They will continue to impact marine life for decades. The toxic chemical dispersant corrects it, combined with that oil, to increase the toxicity of the oil by a factor of 50. We simply cannot let California's statewide network of marine protected areas, our national marine sanctuaries, our multi-billion-dollar coastal economy, and our enduring love of the coast get in harm's way by leaving the door open for new offshore oil drilling. The consequences are simply too great. We need to close this loophole today. So the Environmental Action Committee and the California Coastal Protection Network respectfully urge the committee to pass Senate Bill 788. We thank Senator McGuire for his leadership on this important issue and respectfully urge your aye vote.
Thank you for your testimony. If you could please state your organization and your support.
Andrew Grinberg, Clean Water Action, support.
Thank you.
Olivia Regalia, Sierra Club, California, and strong support.
Thank you.
Kelly Dana on behalf of California League of Conservations and Support. I'm also here to Me Too for NRDC and Trust for Public Lands.
Thank you.
Richard Charter, the Ocean Foundation, and strong support.
Thank you.
Corey Bullis on behalf of Environmental Defense Fund and strong support.
Haley Stewart with Defenders of Wildlife and support.
Thank you.
Dan Bacher, editor, Fish Sniffer Magazine, strong support.
Thank you, sir. Any others in support of the bill, please come forward. If not, I'll call the opposition forward.
Mr. Chairman and members, Eloy Garcia for the Western States Petroleum Association. We will do our best to be brief, but we hope we have a little bit of balance here. Just real quickly, what I didn't hear in the description of the legislation and of the current Public Resources Code.
Senator Stone, excuse me.
Senate Resource Code 6244 was how it actually works. Oh, okay. Apologies. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Pro Tems asked us to recess, and then we'll figure out how to come back to finish up. Yes. All right.
I hate to interrupt you, but the pro tem says that we need to recess and that we're going to figure out how we can reassemble. So I apologize to interrupt you.
We can't object to that. We appreciate the opportunity to come back and thank you very much.
So we will resume at the appropriate time.
Leave our binders in this room, do we know?